be here all the time. I always go to John's house. The sign on the grass in a certain secret place said, "To live life as 'tis normally led is little more than a dreamy stroll in the park, a stroll along familiar paths which little requires one's attention, a stroll at times pleasant enough and at other times not so pleasing, yet neither sensation permanent and none of it intolerable. Just on and on you stroll, and truth is, regardless of what thoughts mutter contraire, with hardly a serious care or responsibility in the world." This is the everyday stroll of ordinary men, men whose saunter will take them from one end of the park to the other, and with scarcely any attentive thought required. Some men are given to promenades in public places more than are others. And some men's idea of where they walk is more an internal matter than an external one. It's true, and obviously so, that there is nowhere you can be but here, and no time you have but now. And everyone knows it. Well, everyone but the mind. The son of a certain father one day came to him with a question. "Sometimes in my judgments I overestimate things, and sometimes in my judgment I underestimate them." And the old man's response was, "What do you mean, sometimes?" After hearing it said, one man began repeating to himself over and over again, "Although happiness is certainly an emotion, emotions do not cause happiness." There was once a body and a mind who were on a journey together, and one day the body said to its mental traveling companion, "You believe that you decide where we are going, why we are going, and what it will take for us to arrive. But it is me who actually does the walking and gets us there." "So?" replied the mind. "Well," said the body, "well, I just thought that never mind. It's not important." Which indeed, dear friends, it is not. It could scarcely be of less readily observable importance to anyone that is, except the mind. When things are too well in balance, and you're not, it's hard to make sense of them. Ordinary men continue to argue over whether or not such things as love, faith, God, justice, and the truth, etc., exist or do not exist. And the irrefutable evidence that a man does not even have a clue as to what life is actually about is that he will debate such questions. And for those of you in graduate school who may be sitting in on this class, I will note for you that the advanced reality of the above fact is that the clear proof that a man doesn't even suspect what is going on in life is if he will argue any question. Eating can be enjoyable, but it takes you nowhere new. It merely makes survival possible. And while thinking can also be quite pleasurable, it too will take you nowhere you have not already been. Again and again. One chap mused, "Why don't men go ahead and admit outright to themselves their main and best loved pastime? Anything habitual." The obvious is very seldom noted. Why do you think that the ordinary call it the obvious? Special sight. That's right. We're back to the matter of not just what you see, but how you go about seeing it. And those unaware of their forced amour for things as they are forever stuck with things just as they are. A certain boy once asked his mother, "Is it easier to discover the secret when you're 17 or when you're 57? "Exactly," she replied. A man asked a physician, "Is there a cure for the emotion of sadness?" "Yes," he replied. "Abandon emotions." The obvious response which, after all these thousands of years, continues to come as a surprise. And now for some serious, medical news. A certain researcher now has enough substantial statistical evidence to show conclusively that you cannot properly treat, much less cure, any illness whose symptoms you mistake as the illness. He also expects to publish an advanced paper on this subject later in the year, wherein he will disclose the more controversial aspects of his findings which say that no specific illness can ever be profitably ministered to if it is mistaken for some other illness. Although just between you and me, this last part sounds an awful lot like a description of man's overall normal relationship to himself. But hey, I'm not a professional. What do I know? After years spent in a certain effort, one man so concluded, life is tension, death, relaxation. Therefore, I want to die while I'm still alive to enjoy it. Another inescapable fact, so simple as to be consistently overlooked, is that if your aim is not to be free of yourself, to actually become something other than you are now, then no matter how much you think, talk, and fret about it, you never will be. How is it that men continue to believe that they can achieve other than what they desire? It is the mind, my dear, the mind that, after having decided on a destination, and in face of the fact that it makes no effort to go there, can yet pacify itself by merely recalling the name of the destination. The king once said to his prince, "Those who make note that the search for enlightenment cannot succeed if pursued egotistically, unwittingly expose their own ignorance of the subject, and that those who believe that they personally have anything at all to do with it are not even in the same universe wherein the search can ever commence." A stableman once inquired of a knight, "Why do men continue to flog themselves with the idea that they should be humble, rather than the vain creatures that they take themselves to naturally be, based on their total failure to easily recognize vanity as being but another word for ignorance, a condition for which humility is no cure?" One day, while in one of those brighter, more receptive moods, a man began to pay his respects to life and to extend his gratitude for such times by saying aloud, "Life, you rascal, you sly devil. You're almost as neat as," and here he said the name of his recently deceased dog, then fell silent for a moment as he looked away and added, "Of course, he probably picked up a trick or two from you." Whenever someone would attempt to give this one man a job and hand him a resume to fill out, he'd always write down just one word, "not home," which many potential employers would quickly spot to be two words. A boy asked his father, "Are there actually stages on the way to the state of enlightenment?" And the elder replied, "No. There is the state itself, and then the efforts to achieve it, which, when they are given names and men become overly attached thereto, are often then thought of as some sort of interim stages through which one must or can pass before reaching the ultimate destination. But this is another case of not seeing clearly, for it is simply as I said. There is the state of full realization and liberation itself, and then there are all of the infinite and various efforts available for a man to use to attain it. Don't confuse the two. It wastes your energy and makes you appear an even larger fool." And now tonight's news of UPS, as might be used best. On One World was once a parcel service which would only deliver efforts to where you are right this second. One man said, "I need space," and replied, "How much?" Then answered, "All there is," then added, and then some. Room to maneuver has always been the secret name of the game with the mind. And if room doesn't suit you, try on time. From a correspondent, we received this offer to usefully update a certain well-worn proverb. Offers he. While it is said that much talk means much confusion, it is ultimately a case of any talk means more confusion than is necessary. Man's body, and any other intelligent animal, knows it is painful to have your skin stripped away. But it is man's mind that has taken this fear to a whole new level. A mental place whereat the perceived possible discomfort appears so intense as to automatically bring on immobility. The wisdom of the man on the edge. If you don't jump, you can't get hurt. A prince once asked the head of his father's knightly order, "Will the secret turn out to be just a mirror?" And the warrior replied, "Perhaps, but you need expand your perception of the mirror idea. Do you speak of a reflection of what you are now? A reflection of what you imagine you want to be? Or a direct sighting of what you have been all along, but which was hidden in the shadows of all that you thought?" At the funeral, when it became truth time, someone stood and said, "Those who attempt to explain death are idiots," which easily brought the proceedings to an early conclusion. And now for tonight's serious, or at least semi-passionate, question. How comes it that men routinely claim to be emotionally unhappy when the only real basis for this is physical pain, and they cannot seem to call it as such? Anything other than physical discomfort is simply impulses in the brain combined with thought and translated into words, words describing some external event which it now embraces as having been unhappiness causing. But no, it is only the mind under these conditions that is the cause. How comes it, you think, to be that this sort of thing man can't see? Yes, that's right. There's always much more going on than meets the eye. And for those with enhanced vision, much less. Another dead-on giveaway. As long as you believe that it is a mental strain just to be alive, then you still have no idea what mental means or being alive is. The head of a special type of school once said to those in attendance, "There are two ways to tell if a teaching is truly transcendental. One is by the fact that you feel it is trying to force something on you, and the other is by the fact that you feel it is not. This is your elementary lesson regarding how the mind normally reacts to any information. And he so well warned should be he informed sufficiently to move to higher grades." And now for tonight's serious geological news. Mountains exist because pebbles exist. And men exist because cells exist. And thoughts exist because men believe that they do. And from ignorance, there is no graduation, as long as the name of your school contains any reference to the idea of knowledge. After considerable study on the matter, one man eventually asked himself, what would it be like if you could mentally be attentive to only what you were presently doing? Or perhaps better yet, to be continually conscious of the fact that it generally makes no difference to what you're doing if you're attentive to it or not. Caution. Men, ordinary men attempting the latter, run the distinct risk of developing a headache, the intensity of which they cannot even imagine. And now for some really serious, come on now, medical news. When pain becomes too severe, it turns into confusion. And when confusion becomes unbearable, it turns into certainty. And certainty with a vengeance. So you always thought that fanaticism just suddenly appears from nowhere? One father's son approached him with this inquiry. How would you describe the proper effort to achieve that perfect yoga? And the old man responded, the ability to see in the difficult and unpleasant possibility and pleasure. And now for tonight's serious psychological news. As long as you can't make any more out of suffering than just feeling bad, little is possible in the way of personal growth. Little, indeed. Regarding the problem of finding oneself, there is but one place you can be lost: in life, in the roaring flow of life as it swirls through you. A young man asked an older one if the truth did objectively exist apart from men's thinking about it. Is there some description you could theoretically offer? And the latter chap decided he would reply, and did so thusly. I will give you what would be, if it existed as you noted, the truth's two primary traits. It would be elemental, and it would be transient. What can the mind truly, objectively know of itself? A radio would describe electricity as being an oblong-shaped box with many knobs and lights that emit sounds much like the ones we're used to hearing. It is not the job of objects to define action, or vice versa. Even after one has experienced the awakening, their efforts are not that different from everyone else's. It's just that their understanding of what it is has improved. They have not been relieved of their efforts, and only those who've never tasted claim otherwise. You may file this information under the heading of either things good to know or things I wish I'd never heard of. And now for tonight's serious mystical news. Just what sort of goal is it that the struggle to achieve it is meaningless? And of course the answer is the only goal worth seeking. A girl asked her mother, no matter the many fancy descriptions given it, how can the awakening turn a person into anything other than what they are? Okay, why not tonight? Why not tonight is yet another opportune time for a simple, direct confrontation with it. You can never have a T-bone till you turn loose of that Big Mac. One day a lad sat down next to his dad and said, "Throughout the years I have asked you a lot of questions." "Yes, you have," agreed the old man. "And now I begin to wonder," went on the boy, "is there some place beyond which you will no longer respond thereto?" "Yes," replied his origin. Though never mindful of it, those who seek a teacher look first for one who is a fraud and a thief. And an alert lad would realize that the external search for instruction is but a flimsy reflection of his own inner confusion and desire for its clearing. This, another description of that one goal worth the effort. When one man heard someone use the term synthetic mysticism, he was at first quite fascinated with it, until it struck him that that's the only kind there is. And lastly, claims clearly explained. All claims of whatever variety are all of equal validity and bullshit. There is a question. Amongst others, but one that I assume you will see why I bring it up, because its manifestations, the reality of its existence, permeate most of the pores and all weather tires. No, the human spirit, I guess it is. This one question is that people never ask, why do I want the things I want? All the way from cars to revenge. Ordinary, sane, stable people never ask themselves regarding the things that they believe they want. They never ask themselves, if I had it, of what benefit would it be? This is not belie the fact that people can be standing around talking to friends and somebody say, boy, I sure would like to have a new such and such car, 36Z convertible. And somebody say, well, you just bought a new Corvette, why do you want that? And they go, well, you know, I hear it goes faster. They'll say something like that. This is just part of the meaningless verbal byplay between all people. But a man, an individual, being driven, and the more civilized he is, the more he is driven by desires that are non-survival required. That should be obvious by now. Takes no great mind to see that if you are living under normal civilized conditions wherein you are not fighting for survival on a day-to-day basis, there has to be some reason to get up. There has to be some reason to continue to find yourself motivated. And most people would consider that it has to do with the emotional qualities, the emotional interest in life, because people would confer to a new car, not for the sake of transportation, but a new car. They would describe it as an emotional desire, if you present it in the right way without it sounding as though you're attacking them, because they do not need it for physical survival, or they do not need this new one for actual physical survival, even at a second order level, such as, well, I've got to get to work to make a living. They want it for reasons, if they'd be just halfway, as they call it, honest, they'd probably say, well, I could pick up more women. I don't know, at least to themselves, they picture themselves, and it's an emotional picture they would think if I asked them about it. They picture themselves in this shiny red car with the top down, maybe their hair just slightly blonde and a little longer than it is now, flying down the highway or stopped at lights, and all these beautiful girls standing down the corner going, boy, you know, I'd take him in a minute as long as he got that car. Well, men and women, well, that's a different thing, but men don't like to dwell on the last part. At any rate, I assume you see that it does have an emotional content, to say the least. And given you the spectrum that I offered originally when I said that people never ask why they want what they want, and as examples I gave, I said all the way from a new car to revenge. Now, if we get into revenge, with ordinary minds, there would be no question whatsoever that we're talking about something of an emotional quality. So without me continuing to have to labor examples, but I'm telling you, I offered as a challenge, you can look at all the way from literally physical possessions, such as an automobile, to those of an entirely non-physical nature that are certainly, by all accounts, emotional, such as revenge. And I challenge you, you can consider it yourself. Through all of these non-survival required things that people might want, they never, ever ask themselves in anything resembling an objective manner. They don't even attempt it. To ask themselves, if I had this, if I had revenge, if I had a new car, not the dreams now, not me sitting here right this second thinking about how so-and-so cheated me in a deal 5 years ago, and I keep plotting all the dirty things, and every time you hear a new dirty trick that somebody's done, you think, that's what I'll do. You keep either that or just the same old rehashing of what you should do to him. I'm not talking about the imagination, nor the imagination of you picturing yourself in this car. Just if you just picture yourself in an emotional situation or an emotionally charged or an emotionally based situation, just picturing yourself, no matter how often, does not constitute in any way any inquiry as to why I want it. You understand? That you picture yourself driving this new car and it makes you feel good. Sitting there all alone, not in the car, sitting there in an old ratty armchair at home. But you picture the car and you picture you in it, and just like that, you feel good. And it's like additional reinforcement that, yes, it would be good for me to have the car. I would enjoy the car. I want the car. And as anyone who knows, or if you don't know, if you're just watching this for the first time, this has nothing to do in any manner with a tax on possessions, much less sports cars. But to experience the imaginary emotional pleasure of having gained this possession, having achieved what you're dreaming of, a new car or revenge, it does not belie the fact that if you sit there, you can continue to dream of owning a red Corvette or Ferrari for the rest of your life and it never lose its luster. That simply thinking about it and enjoying the picture of you in it in no wise ever offers any new insight to you as to why you own it. It doesn't offer, it makes no comment to my question. When I said the question is not asked of why do I want it, because it seems obvious. I enjoy thinking about it, so I obviously would enjoy having it. That's two different things. A man never asks himself, an ordinary man never asks himself that he's sitting there imagining this car, and it's never been any doubt. That is one of his primary interests in life, let's say. He just dreams of being able to afford an expensive sports car. He never fails to think about it, not even one particular brand. He can think of a wide variety of cars that he might or that he could possess if he had the money. And each time, he always feels pleasure. So there's no question about that. But he never asks himself, beyond that instant moment of feeling pleasure and dreaming of having this possession, he never asked himself then, when I said, as best he can, anything attempting an objective view. That is, don't just settle for the feeling of pleasure you get sitting there imagining you in the car, or you finally getting revenge on so-and-so. Throughout the years, you keep imagining, if you did this to him, and you just imagine, don't make me have to make up some elaborate hoax, some way that you really swindle this guy. You get him all excited and it's drug out over days. And finally, right at the tail end, when he thinks something great and wonderful is going to happen to him, suddenly the rug is pulled out from under him. It cost him dearly, and you suddenly appear and he realizes what's happened. And the look on his face, and right then the joy you feel. We're not questioning that. I'm not making any moral judgment, as you know. And you enjoy. You just see him. You picture this whole thing over and over, and it gets more elaborate, this great scheme. And finally, when you make it aware to him that he has been bamboozled at a very costly, to a very costly degree, and he goes, and right then you feel enjoyment. Sitting there alone, you haven't seen him in years, you sit there and imagine it, and you have a kind of emotional pleasure out of it, similar to imagining yourself in the car. But no one attempts, ordinary mind cannot be objective, but no one attempts what I said. They make no attempt at an objective inquiry. That is, they will not even go past the experience of pleasure over imagining the possession of this thing, car or revenge. They never go past that to go, okay, I enjoy thinking about it. But they never go, wait a minute. He just had the pleasure of imagining the guy realizing, I've been took. After all these years, God, I wish I'd never, all the things you imagine, just a pleasure to see his face when he realizes that you've done it to him. And it's probably going to ruin his life worse than the effect he had on yours. That or the car. Either way, you receive pleasure from imagining it. But no one does that. That's already happened, let's say, that's happened there you sit. And no one ever stops and goes, something like this, like, well, I've been imagining having this car, getting revenge like this now for 10 years. And I always feel so good about it. They make no inquiry like, wait a minute. Besides the pleasure of me letting that scene play out through my mind again and again, and those little snatches of me in the car, and I glance around out of the sides of my expensive shades, and I see these beautiful girls standing on the corner going, woo. That's the end of it. It just flashes and it's gone, flashes and it's gone. The same thing with the story of you getting revenge. But no one ever stops after that and goes, well, no, wait. And not denying. You're not involved with some sort of guilt, and you're not involved with trying to flog yourself with some amount of guilt like, well, I shouldn't do this, or I don't need a car. There are people starving in Europe. No. Let them eat a Ferrari. No, that's and send me the leftovers. What a crude person that was, whoever said that. Shame on them. I'm sure they will be getting a quite dirty letter on their birthday from Mother Teresa. No one, after experiencing the pleasure, stops and asks anything along this line. That I continue to find that pleasurable. I'm not questioning that. But what if right now, sitting in my drive, was a $150,000 Ferrari, and it was mine? Now, I understand the pleasure, but I've already gotten enough. I understand the pleasure of it. This is you talking to yourself. I understand the pleasure of it because I almost wet my pants just sitting here in the armchair thinking about having it. So I know that there'd be some pleasure. But I also know this. After driving it a week, it'll become a car. 2 weeks at the most. And after that, the only thing I will get resembling any sort of pleasure other than having reliable transportation will be if someone brings up from their own view an emotional response to this. That is, I'm somewhere getting gas and somebody comes up and goes, wow, God, are you lucky. All my life I have dreamed of such as that. For a second. Nothing as strong and as long-lasting as even the momentary ones you used to get before you had the car sitting at home alone, but you will get perhaps a spark. But I mean, we're talking simply second, 2 seconds at the most, and it's gone. And a man with any intelligence would know this, and we're back to him sitting there and going, all right. So I'm aware of that. But I'm aware that there is pleasure. There was initial pleasure. But the question is, if I actually owned a Ferrari right now, or Corvette, whatever, how would I personally have benefited? What would be the benefit to me personally? Now, benefit is much more, I'm assuming, with an intelligent person if you just pushed them a little bit. And of course, for you people, I wouldn't take a push, I will assume. But to ask a person, or to ask them if there's a difference between mere happiness, mere joy, which is always transient, between that and benefit. That even an ordinary person, if you caught them in a weak moment wherein they might be semi-intelligent, they would have to admit that there's got to be a difference between benefit, which would be something of a long-range nature, something that would be a benefit to you personally, and a simple pleasure, or a pleasure, such as a car, whether you call it simple or not, a Ferrari. It is not something that is long-lasting. There's no guarantee whatsoever, no assurance, no expectation that the joy it brings is in any way long-lasting. For nothing else, it can be wrecked tomorrow, and you're out. But no one asks of what benefit, and no one's surely asked when it is obviously something of an emotional nature to start with, like revenge. Again, not discounting the joy that everyone feels. You don't have to be a sinner. You don't have to be a Catholic. You don't have to be anything except alive to experience that kind of private joy and thinking about well-deserved, well-earned revenge for some past slight. So we're past the point that you enjoyed every time you think about getting even with Bruno, how he'll look when he realizes you have wrecked his life. Not just wrecked his life, built him up with new expectations, and then wrecked his life. All right. No one then goes, I sure do enjoy that, thinking about it. But if I actually did that, and it worked out just like I said, and there was Bruno really, and reacted in that, in a manner as crushed, or perhaps even worse in real life than I imagine. All right, after that, what? This has nothing to do with morality. Nothing. The question, it has to do with economics. has to do with efficiency on your part, how you're spending your life, is then asked of what benefit, not what pleasure at that moment. I'll grant you the pleasure. That would it be as much fun or more thinking for it to happen than it would for you to imagine it. And so you went to all the effort, you did it, and you have actually probably diverted his life in such a detrimental way that he will never be able to recover. Ha ha! I love it. Okay. They'll be gone a few minutes. Probably gone a few seconds. If you got any sense, if life has got you in the right place, you'll immediately find someone to talk to. You try to keep it alive through memory. You keep retelling the story. But the question a person should be asking themselves, which they never do, is then, there they sit alone picturing this, and then picturing further that, all right, let's say I did do it, and absolutely wrecked his life. He stands right there at that instant, and he realizes that what he did to me is just pitiful. It was just pales in comparison, hardly begins to cover it. I have ruined his life. He knows that I did it, and he knows why. Ha ha! Okay. A few minutes later, it's over. And this is the man still, the kind of question. And then him think. And one more time, having nothing to do with karma, morality, anything. It has nothing to do with anything external to you. The question that people do not ask is, of what benefit, which is long range now, not the temporary pleasure that I'm granting the man would have. People do not ask of what benefit, not pleasure, of what benefit would that have been? Would that be to my life? If I achieved that, if I achieved revenge, the sweetest, most painful revenge I can imagine on Bruno, what would be the benefit to me? Not pleasure, one more time. The benefit. I assume you see the point. Religion, in its own crude way, and simple morality, civilized codes of behavior, but especially religion, beats this thing to death on a very simplistic level, as you know, because they always look for a reference point external to the individual that they know, as all humans do. It doesn't take anybody religious. Everyone knows that something smells about revenge, not a physical struggle for survival. Not that if we were back in the basis that we were struggling day to day to physically survive, and yesterday Bruno got to the newest mulberry tree that we found, all of us live in the same cave area, that he got to it first and he ate them all. Or he grabbed them all and stuffed them in his shorts and took them home and wouldn't share them. That doesn't mean that the next day you might try to push him out of the way and all that, but that is not revenge. It is not a holdover of memory. The closest thing to be a holdover to memory is you just know from then on that you went out and let Bruno get a step on you. If he gets in front of you, he'll get him. But it's not a matter of revenge. Survival is not based on revenge. Survival is based on survival. Ordinary people, the things that they seek are always on the basis of some imagined pleasure, or some pleasure as they imagine it to be, which I'm not questioning. But they do not ask what would be of any benefit. And the answer is, what can you think about? What is available to an ordinary man, if you see where I'm going, that is of benefit? And the answer is nothing. The secret, or one way to approach it, as I started to say, is laying right out there in public in a very crude form, but nonetheless easily extracted, easily deduced from what's going on, if you can see, and that is by religion and ordinary people condemning such things as revenge. But always on the basis, always the judgment based on some external, apparent external point that God doesn't want us to be revengeful, that that's not man's place and all that. That's a sin. Or the secular law just says revenge is not up to the individual, that's disruptive to the collective peace. That's why we have laws. If you've got a grievance against your fellow man, that's what we have the tort courts for. That's what we have civil courts. Sue the bastards. But it's not up to you to go out and seek revenge on the person. But we just simply can't do it. It's not a matter of whether you deserve revenge for what he did to you, but we can't have every individual playing judge and juror and executioner and sheriff. You got to let the courts do it. You got to let us and our collective judicial system do it, which is the same thing as religion saying, let God take care of it. Don't you do it. The point being that everyone knows that something is fishy. When the humans know that something is fishy, what they do is condemn it. They don't investigate it. And when I say fishy, I assume you know what I mean. Everybody knows that this pleasure you imagine over having a $150,000 car, assuming that your average income for all of your life is like $20,000 a year. Imagining the pleasure, the benefit that you would derive from having this car, or the benefit you would have over wrecking, for the sake of revenge, Bruno's life. Everyone realizes, unwittingly, as ordinary people would say, non-consciously, which is simply non-verbally, which is simply unwittingly. It's part of the general flow of life, but it has not reached a level of intensity wherein people actually think of it. But the manifestation of it, their awareness of it, is reflected in the fact that people continue, that it's common to condemn avarice past a certain point. To tell a guy with a fifth grade education, they'll never make over $20,000, that, you shouldn't worry about having a Ferrari. You're never going to have one. You're just driving yourself crazy. And especially those who can afford them are always quite willing to tell poor people, oh, you don't need that. So, all the way from that to religion saying that men should not seek revenge. The point is, there is a kind of uncodified, unspecified, common knowledge that most of the desires, many of the desires that men cherish are fishy, that something stinks somewhere near Sheboygan. And it may not be a cheese factory. That they sense something is wrong. Well, think about it. I mean, it's not a big secret. Why else would men stand still? Why else would men not only stand still for it, but go and solicit, such as in religion, that everyone pictures, everyone can taste the sweetness, the enjoyment of getting revenge for some ill treatment they have suffered. They taste it. They imagine it. I've already told you, I'm not questioning it. I know that people sit there and picture getting revenge, and it is pleasurable, the whole picture of it. But unwittingly, life has placed the knowledge, the awareness in man that something is fishy on this basis. What I was getting at is, if it's all that sweet, if it is unqualified sweet, if the desire in its unconditional realization would give the pleasure imagined, then men would not, rise to you rhetorically, would men go out and spend money, dress up on Sunday or Saturday or Tuesday, and go somewhere, suit and tie, have to take a shower, drag the kids along, and go somewhere week after week to stand and hear another man, another dumb stranger, stand and condemn revenge? Now, something's funny. One way or the other, you got to look at it this way. One way or the other, something is going on funny in you, or something's going on funny in that situation, that you will pay somebody, solicit them, go out of your way to go hear somebody condemn revenge when you were just sitting at home imagining it, how sweet it would be. Behind that which men condemn is always something that is fishy, which is to say, it is something, the only reason anything is condemned is that it's not understood. So here you have, back to my question, is there anything that men normally experience that is not subject to my question, which I've already inferred the answer, my question of what benefit would it be? And I can leave it as a rhetorical challenge, but I'm assuming that you're catching on what I'm pointing at, with no judgment having to do with possessions or morality or anything. That which men think that which men need, without knowing it, that would bring about benefit, not temporary pleasure, which is fine. If you're satisfied with pleasure, it's not my business. It's no one's business. And most of the world is satisfied with pleasure. If they did not have the minor pleasures like food and sex, and watching the ball games after sex down at the bar, a good cigar, if men did not have such pleasures, I wouldn't want to be around them. I mean, it's all you can do it's all you can do to keep men barely civilized and tolerable to be around, even at arm's length. So none of us should be questioning the so-called pleasures of the flesh. And even pleasures, apparently, the non-flesh, like people going to church, which makes us, to some people, makes as much sense that people enjoy that as it does that people enjoy eating artichokes or rutabagas or sleeping in hair shirts. I don't know. So it's not a matter of questioning the pleasure, but it's a matter that people do not realize. A few people, now I'm speaking more specifically to people who might be interested in such as this, that they never question what's going on in their life, the things that they spend mentally, mucho of their time dreaming of. And they never question, why do I keep doing this? If these dreams were realized, of what benefit would they be? And I will assume that there are enough of you now know that one more time, it has nothing to do with morality, it has nothing to do with God being proud of you, and has nothing to do with being an ascetic. All of those come about after the fact. There are very crude attempted backdoor approaches for people to go join up like a monastery, live the life of an ascetic, give away everything they have. Do you understand what I mean by backdoor? I shouldn't call it a backdoor approach. It's attempting to back up a one-way street and pretend you're going forward and then wave at people. Because it's not, when I say a backdoor approach, I don't mean it'll work, but it's like going ahead and join a monastery, because oftentimes those with minor hungers for the mystical, the classic monastic environment usually provides two interesting and apparently beneficial or pleasurable at the moment for the people who have a slight mystical interest. That is, they normally forbid all talking, which is an immediate help, and they normally make you give away everything. That no one in the monastery has anything other than the clothes they got on and a plate and a spoon and a cup. And that's it. Everybody's in the same position. No one has anything. And, of course, as you all know, they make theoretical, verbal, all sorts of fanciful dreams about all this and why God's pleased and it's good for us and all that. It's based on reality, but it's just a crude, you understand, going down a one-way street backwards. Is you go ahead and imitate the behavior with no understanding of it. It's not going to do you any particular harm, but you're not getting the benefit. You'll never get the full benefit from it. You may simply stay there. Many people do, and they find it more pleasurable to be in a place where they don't have to yak all the time and where they certainly don't have to hear everybody else yak all the time. And plus, they can't overtly get involved with running the rat race anymore and trying to get possessions, because there are no possessions allowed. And so at least the behavior has been affected in a way that they find agreeable. But a person this side of that's going to do it the right way, that you've got to understand that all of this arises from the mind, and simply changing behavior or starting out changing behavior or putting yourself under circumstances where your behavior is forced to undergo an alteration is not going to produce necessarily, by any means, any new understanding, much less enlightenment, awakening, or the perfect yoga, the divine union, the ultimate liberation. It just simply may be agreeable, that you may simply like being silent and around silent people, and you may find it agreeable not to even have the possibility of getting a new car, since it seemed like it was such a slim chance of you ever getting that one anyway. So at least now you can, now see, I can't say at least now you can quit worrying about it. No. You can quit worrying about the possibility of whether you can or not, because you know you can't, not as long as you're there. You can struggle, you can sit and meditate better than any monk there in the monastery. You can eat less rice than anybody. You can work harder than anybody and become the most revered monk in the place, and it still won't bring you a Ferrari. Never will. So at least in that sense, you can't quit thinking about it, but you can quit fretting over, I should be out working harder. There's nothing you can do now that will ever bring you that Ferrari. An individual person, a non-standard person, should be asking, what of the dreams you have, and now we're way past, as you'll see, we're way past automobiles, revenge, and anything else normally known. What do all of your thoughts about what you desire, and now we'll assume of a much higher, honorable, metaphysical level, such as my desire in life, poo-poo a sports car, and nay, revenge. What I seek is, if I may be so bold to call it this, go ahead. I seek to be enlightened. Enlightened, is it? Yes. Enlightened. It's like, I mean, in the normal sense of the mystical term, yes. Very well. I mean, may I ask you this? Can you describe to me in what way being enlightened, as you understand it now, will benefit you? For those of you in TV land, someone inadvertently, which does not normally happen, but someone in the audience went, speaking the part of the person who was asked the rhetorical question of what benefit would enlightenment be, somebody uncontrollably went, oh shit. Which I see I have no ability to improve upon that. I wasn't going to answer it myself because I assumed that you would silently see what I was inferring. It is a most subtle, and always has been. I'm not the first to discover it, and you won't be the first to discover it either. A most subtle point of potential captivity. A potential captivity that has no mechanical, no automatic cessation to it. And that is, you do not see that there is an absolute difference between attempts to do something and the achievement of it. And everyone will say, well, yeah, I know that. And I can go back to my common descriptions all the way from a man who attempts to quit drinking to a man who attempts to achieve enlightenment, which may seem to be two different subjects. Yeah, I know, they appear to be two different subjects, but if you think that the dynamics involved are two different dynamics, then you might as well go back to drinking, or maybe you are drinking. Or maybe you're having flashbacks to moments when you're inebriated. Or perhaps now there's not that much difference between your normal state and one of inebriation. One of the tricks that was described in some detail in a news item tonight, that a boy asked his father, obviously based on things he had read and heard, he said, are there actually stages between in the effort, in the struggle to achieve the awakening, the enlightenment? Are there actual stages? And the father said, no. He said, there is simply the state itself. He was using his son's terminology. There's the state itself, the state of liberation, and the various, diverse, many, infinite, I believe he said, efforts that a man can exercise in his attempt to achieve it. But do not confuse the two. And the danger, or this subtle trap I was going to point out, is that once something is given a name, once enlightenment, once a man's aim is given a name, it could be enlightenment or sobriety. Once it is given a name, if a man becomes overly attached thereto, and what the news item didn't bother to point out, which you're supposed to already know, that once something has a name, it doesn't matter what instance we're talking about, it then has the built-in potential to become overly attractive to anyone who thinks about it. That once it is given a name, but back to more direct telling, that once something is given a name, this destination, once the mind has decided, there's my destination, the perfect yoke or union with the divine, the awakening, once it is given it a name and it becomes overly attached thereto, which is inevitable to begin with, and it can end there forever, but at least you have always faced with that will happen. You will become overly attached to it. But for a very good reason from the mind's view, is that then once you have decided my destination is enlightenment, once the mind has selected this destination, it has a name for it, or it's picked up a name, that's it, enlightenment, then in face of the fact, in spite of the fact that after that no effort is made to attempt to go there, the mind is pacified by being able to simply recall and recount the name of the destination. There is no way after that to tell an ordinary man's mind, his thinking, there's no way to make it clear to him that you have now taken a name for the destination to be the effort to get there. And to say they're not the same thing is almost an insult to a man's intelligence, if an ordinary man had any real intelligence. And then on top of that, there is the feeling that as long as I'm thinking about that, it is a worthy desire of which I think. And you say, well, what's the benefit in you thinking about it? And if you were talking to somebody actually who believed they're involved with such as this, they would begin to try and describe to you the benefits, as they understand, of being awakened or enlightened, of all the good things. And you go, no, that's not what I asked. I said, what's the benefit in thinking that you want it? And it's worse than that. Well, worse in the sense if you are interested in efficiency of energy and not dying and still be bleeding to death and not knowing what happened. If you do not question what you think about what the intent of such as this, what your intent, not my intent, not what Zen Buddhism's intent is, not what Islamic Sufism is, not what Christian or Jewish mysticism's intent is. They got no intent. They got names. And you can go, yeah, but I like that name. I know you do. You got to start with a name. But then a man, you've had a few years, then to ask a man, why do you keep wanting a Ferrari? Enlightenment. Back to where we started. I offered you a rhetorical question. Or a statement posed as a question for you to consider. There is one question that ordinary men never ask themselves, and damn few non-standard men. But certainly nothing that men ordinarily ask themselves, and that is, why are the things, or a specific thing, why is anything I desire? Why is it that I desire any particular thing that I desire? Of what benefit, if I had it, of what benefit would it be to me? Now, under ordinary conditions, it's neither here nor there, because it's not going to get you any closer or further away from having a Ferrari or revenge. But if you do it on the area of what would effectively be a change in your state, and you continue to think about and mistake the effort for the state, mistake action for an object, and vice versa, it can go either way. As long as you do that, you will still sit there and never ask yourself of what benefit, not of having the state, but of what benefit is it me thinking about having the state? And you have, I might point out, you probably would guess this, I'll just give you my rough statistical guess, there's probably a better chance of you sitting around thinking about a Ferrari and it actually coming to you than it is you sitting around thinking about that kind of perfect union wherein you have discovered yourself or wherein you're enlightened. There's probably a better chance of the Ferrari showing up in your driveway than one morning you go out in the backyard and you're awake from thinking about it. And someone just pointed out to me that someone just asked that I seem to at first been pointing to something over the last 40 or 50 minutes and then seem to have made to them even more confused. And I know how they say that, and I think I can clear up pretty shortly exactly why you feel confused based on what I started out saying, except we're out of tape.